Hi everyone! I just wanted to get us started on our Tiny Seed project, and hopefully by now you've had a chance to read Eric Carle's story, The Tiny Seed. And I just wanted to share that one of the things that I love best about Eric Carle is that he's an author. He writes his own stories and he illustrates them, or he creates the pictures to go along with them. So to me, that tells me that not only is he talented in a lot of different ways, but he's also probably willing to try new things and to see if there's something else that he can add to his skills, which I think is amazing. The other cool thing that I learned about Eric Carle is that when he's getting ready to create his illustrations, he actually prepares his paper as its own art project. So basically, when you see his finished work in the book, it's a collage that's made up of all these beautiful pieces of paper that he's done already, because he looks at that as its own art. And the thing that I like about that is that it teaches us that even the smallest thing, shading on a paper, can be important, and it can tell us to take our time, and we can put our focus on that and have patience with that, because that alone is a piece of art. So I think that that was a really interesting thing to learn about him, that he sets up his paper and that's a work of art, and then he goes ahead and he takes it and makes it into a collage. So he has two pieces of art in one little illustration in his story. So I think that that's a really interesting thing to think about. So that's actually what we're going to do. This week, what we're going to focus on is our coloring technique and making sure that our paper is filled with beautiful color and how we do that. And then the other thing we're going to do is next week, we're going to cut our paper and turn it into a collage. So it'll be two parts. Now, just so you know, Eric Carle does use a lot of different kinds of media. That means, tools to make our artwork. So it could be crayons, colored pencils, markers, things like that. And Eric Carle does also use paint. Now, what will happen is he'll use different techniques or ways to paint. Now, because we're at home with mostly coloring objects, things like crayons and colored pencil, like I mentioned, we're going to be focusing more on our coloring technique. But I just did want to mention that he does use a lot of paint as well. So we are going to try and get to that point where we have the same texture on our paper that he's able to get through paint through the use of our coloring tools, okay? So when we talk about texture, it means the way the lines look on the page, and it means the way that you can sometimes see the way that the person laid the color onto the paper. So that's what we're going to look at today. So let's take a look at my paper. It's very simple. We just got started with a piece of white paper, and I'm going to use a combination. These are almost like big crayons. They're watercolor creams where, you can add water and turn them into paint, but I'm just going to use them as crayons today to show you a little bit more of, what a crayon texture is going to look like. And then I'm actually going to use some other green colored pencils because I want to mix media. That means when you add together different kinds of coloring tools. Okay, so we're going to look at that today. So the first thing we have to do, this is important because as you saw in the Tiny Seed, the main colors we're going to look at are kind of a red and a reddish orange, and then green, because that's obviously the parts of the seed that we're looking for. So I'm going to just start coloring my paper. Now you'll notice I'm shading in just big side to side motions. I'm filling up as much of the paper as I can. And you can see, this is what I mean about texture. Okay, the texture that I'm showing you is a little bit of a rough texture. You can see almost all the motions that I'm creating in the paper. Okay, it's not very smooth. Okay. I can see all the line marks that I made, and I like that. I want to keep that because that's similar or almost the same as what Eric Carle does when he works with paint, is he'll sometimes lay out the paint, he'll let it dry a little bit, and then he'll go ahead and he'll take a brush over the top, and the brush might be a little bit dry, and he'll just kind of go over that with his brush, and he wants to leave some of that white patchy space in between, okay? So one thing I do want to do is I want to take another of my colors, my orange, okay, and I want to layer over some of the big white spaces. Not all of them. I want to leave some because, again, texture. And if you're using a crayon, okay, the other thing you can do is, in addition to spreading out the color in big spaces, to get some more texture, you can also go like this, kind of tap the crayon in one direction. And it almost acts like a paintbrush if you do it that way. And the goal is to fill up all of the space. So you want to get the edges. You want to make sure you have a whole paper full of this beautiful red and orange. Now, if you like to, you are welcome to add some colored pencil or crayon. So I'm going to actually grab another red colored pencil, and I'm just going to add in a little layer of color of this red. And I'm just going to go around the edges a little bit. Again, I really like these big white patchy spaces because it looks a lot like Eric Carle's illustrations. So I don't want to fill in too many of these white spaces, just a little bit. And I want to just add to the edges, okay? So again, your goal for the red and orange is to fill up as much space as possible, okay? You see I have basically my whole page is filled, okay? And I could probably go even a little bit more with that. Now my next step is going to be doing the same process, okay, with the green. So I'm going to take my big green crayon here, and again, I'm just going to work on laying out my color. Just filling up that space. And as you can see, that texture is really showing up. And another thing you can do, a little tip, is if you have something that I find is if you have a regular crayon and it's an old crayon and it has, you know, the side peeled off, that gives you a really nice texture and it helps you shade really quickly too. So if you take a crayon without its wrapper, turn it on its side, you can do this just as quickly as I am. So you can see I'm just kind of getting all into the edges as best I can, okay? Now I'm going to go in, I actually chose 2 colored pencils, okay, different shades of green. And I'm going to, like I said, layer that in as well. Filling in some of the green space, but not too much. And I'll just take my time. Like I said, this is our art in and of itself. This is our art, just like Eric Carle does with getting his paper ready and looking at his paper with the color as its own work of art. So we'll just go back in. I'm just switching up the pencils and again filling in some of those spaces just to blend a little bit. Okay, and then I'll just make sure I get some more of my corners here. And the goal by the end of today is that you want 2 pages all filled in with color, taking your time, that are ready for our work next week. And you can add more greens than just I did. I chose 3, but you can take lots of greens. And once you lay the first main color down, you can go over like I did with as many greens as you want, or same thing with the red and orange. You can feel free to use more shades of red and orange, especially if you have a large pack of crayons. You'll see there's so many different types of reds and oranges and greens. So this is our start for this week. Again, take your time and think about how we're laying out that color, making sure we have that nice texture in there and blending of color and media, types of things to color with. And then what we'll do is next week we'll join together and we will put together our collage just like Eric Carle. Thank you so much for joining me and take good care.